All right, Webster Griffin Tarpley is our guest. We're getting him lined up to go on air with us here. And there's so much that I want to discuss with him today in the time we have. So much that's happening in the media and in our world. But Webster doesn't even know what I'm going to ask him here up front. But I want his take on this before we get into Libya, Uganda, Syria, what's happening domestically. What do you make of the Trayvon James thing? Because that's the biggest story in the country right now. And turns out that Mr. Zimmerman has these black friends coming out and defending him. Turns out witnesses told police, this was never released in the report, that Trayvon Martin was on top of him, punching him in the face. I'm not taking sides in this, but it looks like one of these manufactured diversions, and it looks like Obama, because you were the first to talk about this 4 years ago. You've written 3 books on it, but I know in one of them you talk about Odinga when he didn't win the election in Kenya, and all of this was going on, that he told, and the letter's public, he told Odinga to cause riots and interstripe between Christian blacks and Muslim blacks as a way to try to force his way into some type of government position. They created a prime ministership for him. My gut tells me this is like a beta test, so they can use the Trayvon Martin situation with the George Zimmerman situation as a way to beta test some type of race war, limited outbreak, so that Obama has an excuse to declare an emergency. Do you think that's in left field?
Well, let me say, first of all, Alex, I think that in general, in terms of the big issues, the movement of people who are protesting, right, even people that one doesn't need to agree with, right, from the Jesse Jacksons to the Al Sharptons, whatever they are right that there is a lot of institutionalized racism in police departments, that there's a double standard, that black suspects are treated differently. I would also go on to say that this stand your ground law in Florida seems to me to be a legal monstrosity that makes absolutely no sense, seems to be designed to produce more violent crime rather than less, seems to have had that effect. But then when we get down to the level of the individual facts in this case, I think it's much less clear. And I have also seen a local television report of someone who says that he's an eyewitness, if that's true, that there was an altercation between these two people, and indeed that Trayvon was supposedly punching Zimmerman. So I think that simply is not clear cut at this point. So I really can't comment on who's right and who's wrong in that immediate sense. The idea that Zimmerman goes from being, I think, a Hispanic, which is what he is, to being just white is also a somewhat strange leap. But certainly the media handling of this, there's absolutely no doubt. This is the kind of incident that the media were waiting for, so that they could begin to foment a kind of artificial racial tension looking forward to the Obama re-election campaign. And concerning the opportunism, in that sense, there's no doubt. On the other hand, again, the complicating factor is that people who are making a big issue out of this are actually pointing to something real, the double standard, the racism, the monstrosity of these stand your ground laws, but at the same time, they're doing it for the wrong reason. In other words, they're doing it for a partisan political cause. So all in all, a somewhat murky kind of situation, not clear cut. And I have no, I am not going to choose one side or the other in this, because I think
exactly. But with the Trayvon Martin situation, with the George Zimmerman situation, it's got all the markers of the media trying to play the American people off against each other. And then when you've got real cases of, police shooting a black guy in the back who's in handcuffs and lying about it, then when people protest, oh, the media says it's bad. But when they can just say it's a white guy, it reminds me of that whole lacrosse college team, with the black stripper and all that. It turned out that was made up. There's this real desire to get racial tension going. Overall, why do you think that's going on, Webster?
Well, again, the reason the media do this is because of the at least a large part of these television characters are devoted to getting Obama reelected, and they're devoted to serving him in any way.
All right, stay there. When we come back, I want to ask you why Obama's putting executive orders in to take over the economy, secretly arrest citizens, all the new wars. Where are they going? What's their big strategy? Webster Tarpley of Tarpley.net. Stay with us. So I digress. I want to get into Obama's power grab, where he's going. But first, let's get into your travels. Let's get into Corzine. I want to pick your brain on a host of issues about where the Anglo-American establishment is right now, since we've covered the diversion of the whole, Trayvon Martin race war they're trying to get cooking. You've been in Africa, the Coney 2012, all of it. What is going on right now?
Actually, Alex, if I might, just some of the things you were just mentioning, I'm going to be at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. on a week from today, next Monday, April 3rd, I think it is. April 2nd? Anyway, it's next Monday. And David Frum, remember him? He was a speechwriter in the Bush White House. He coined the term axis of evil for that State of the Union. And then Jonathan Kay, that I think you talked to, right? He's got you in his book, right? Among the Truthers. So I'm going to be debating them about 9/11 conspiracy theories, black ops, and more. 6:30 at the Spy Museum a week from today.
Yeah, Frum's attacked me many times. He's a chief neocon, right. And the other guy wanted me to be in his book. I refused to, but I still think I haven't read the whole book.
Anyway,
is that the guy out of Canada?
Yes, right. They're both from Canada.
No, because I had people show me the passage. He implies we had an interview, and I was never interviewed by him.
Well, we'll try to straighten that out a week from today. Anyway, I think a good place to start is what's going on with Obama. We can see his intentions maybe most clearly from what he's doing in Seoul, South Korea. Right? We have this World Nuclear Summit. Right? A lot of countries are there, and we have this very interesting inadvertent or maybe advertent, I don't know, but we have this sort of a leak where Obama is talking to Medvedev, who is still the president of Russia for a few more weeks until Putin takes over. Obama says to Medvedev, you got to give me a little more time, right? Like the song, give me a little more time because I'll have more flexibility after my re-election. And what he's talking about is anti-ballistic missile defense, right? The fact that the U.S. is putting these SM-3 interceptors and also Aegis cruisers in places along, you can say, the western edge of Russia, I suppose we could say, in the Black Sea, in the Baltic, in the Atlantic. And these are interpreted by Russia, and I think correctly, as part of a threatened first strike by the United States against Russia in some situation of tremendous...
Yeah, that way you can nuke Russia with the nuclear subs and ICBMs, and when Russia tries to launch a retaliatory strike, when the missiles are incoming, the anti-missile system shoots those down, so it's a sneak attack grid.
Yes, and of course you have to look at what is he trying to do. This is the last hurrah for Medvedev, at least as president, at least now, and hopefully for permanently. Medvedev has been an absolute disaster. Medvedev is a weakling. He's an appeaser. He did that hamburger diplomacy with Obama. That was idiotic. He went to Silicon Valley and fawned on Jobs and Gates and these people. He's got all kinds of problems, right? He's got a long list. But now he's on his way out. So you can see what Obama's trying to do is to get the last use that they can out of this weakling Medvedev to try to delay the Russian countermeasures. In other words, the Russians say, fine, if you put in this system that's directed against us, then we're going to install these Iskander short-range ballistic missiles in the area around Kaliningrad. Now, you take a look at that. That's the old East Prussia. It's separated from the main body of the Russian Federation by the Baltic states, right? Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, which are now independent countries and indeed NATO members. But the Russians still have this exclave, right? It's like an island of Russia that sits much further west in territory that used to be Germany, right? So it's East Prussia. So Medvedev says, Putin has said, and the Russians have said, if you insist on having an anti-ballistic missile system, then we're going to put in these really fast strike weapons, right, that could hit, NATO bases in Germany within 2 or 3 minutes. So we'll balance you that way. So what Obama is obviously doing is saying, don't do that. Let me get reelected. I'm your friend. Give me a little more time. I need some space. And indeed, it looks like Medvedev says, for whatever it's worth, yes.
But that's Obama's standard deal. Don't worry, they're not going to pass NDAA, and I don't want the secret arrest provision. Turns out he demands it, has it put in, but then says, don't worry, I won't sign it, then does sign it, then says, I won't use the power. Now he says he will. I mean, it's just total deception.
Right, and that's of course Obama's stock in trade. Whereas with Bush we had this blunt, in-your-face, brute, reactionary, imperialist, aggressor, warmonger. With Obama we have deception, dissembling, treachery, stab in the back, all this stuff. But now, what does this have to do with that executive order? The conversation between Medvedev and Obama, it seems to me, makes sense in this kind of a framework. The U.S. and NATO really have to push forward the destabilization of Syria, in particular, as much as they can. And once you do that, once you get involved in some kind of conflict with Syria, then you're likely to be embroiled in a conflict with Iran and Hezbollah and others at the same time. This is at least the logic of a possible plan, maybe not the plan, but a plan. And if you get to a confrontation, suppose the U.S. says we're going to attack Iran, and Russia says don't do it. Iran, of course, you look at the map, right? It's very close to the southern edge of what used to be the Soviet Union. You have the Caspian Sea. If you had a pro-NATO militant government in Iran, this would be the gateway to destabilize the Trans-Caucasus, lots of parts of Russia. The Central Asian states would drift further away from Russia. It would be really a
They could send in all the loving Al-Qaeda forces. I want to shift gears away from Russia. I know you're focused on that right now because it's the heart of all this. A general encirclement. But what about Syria, where they say Al-Qaeda blowing up bases and police departments is the new protesting? They're actually calling it loving protesting, and if police fire back, it's called outrageous.
Well, it looks to me like these are the tactics of desperation. Now, thanks to the fact that Medvedev has been pushed into the background, because that is what has made it possible, the ascendancy of Putin and the fact that the Russians have vetoed these attack resolutions and they've taken the Chinese with them on that, that has now allowed the Syrian army to go into these neighborhoods, really, these parts of cities which had been the only strongholds of these rebels, right? I call them death squads, right? Because that's really what they are. It's NATO death squads that have come in from abroad, plus the deserters and draft resistors and others that they've gathered around them, plus fanatics from the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda and so forth. Those have been pretty much methodically quelled. That would be Homs, that would be Idlib in the north, that would be Daraa in the south. There's another town over by the Iraqi border that has been quelled. They're all along the borders because that's where NATO has been able to ship in their fighters and their supplies and so forth. So right now, the actual rebellion, the activity of the death squads and their fellow travelers has reached a low ebb. And the response to that, of course, by these desperados, the rebels, if we can call them that, is to say, well, we're going to go to Damascus now. We're going to take the war to Damascus and carry out terrorism in Damascus. And the people doing this, indeed, are, in many cases, Al-Qaeda veterans. Some of them are Al-Qaeda veterans that fought under Belhaj in Libya last summer, and they've then been shipped over to Turkey and then into Syria. That's where they're now operating. So what we've always said, that Al-Qaeda is the CIA Arab Legion, Al-Qaeda is the infantry of NATO when they attack these countries.
And then it's also used to take our liberties. But what do you make of the admissions now that Google is NSA run, with the former head of DARPA running it, and that they did indeed do the Arab Spring. Why do they want to put Muslim extremists in charge of all these countries?
I think the goal is to weaken them. The idea being that such stability as the Middle East has had has come through governments that you could generally say are some form of Arab socialism. I mean, that's the common denominator of these places. They all go back to President Nasser of Egypt, and a lot of them have strayed very far from what he represented. But if you look at Gaddafi in Libya, Assad in Syria, Mubarak in Egypt, whatever else they were, they claimed to be nationalist military. Now, again, a lot of them, completely struck out. Right, Mubarak, especially in his last 20 or 25 years, was not really doing anything. But again, better than a civil war, right? And that's really the choice, right? Because you look at Assad, you can say, well, there are problems with Assad. But if the choice becomes Assad or civil war, Assad or chaos, it's clear the choice has to be Assad, but not for the Syrian National Council, a bunch of foreign activists who were paid by NATO intelligence services, and not for the Free Syrian Army, right? Which is this.
Well, sure. The State Department's real stated goal is to destabilize, put extremists in, put burqas on all the women's heads, slaughter the Christians and Jews. That's what the forces have said they're going to do in Syria. That's them saying it. And then I'm anti-American because I don't want to put Al-Qaeda in. I mean, how do they sell this? Give your rights up, Al-Qaeda's going to hit you, but then Al-Qaeda are freedom fighters.
Well, of course, the contradiction, it couldn't be more gaping, and couldn't be, the hypocrisy, the double standard couldn't be more obvious. On the one hand, Al-Qaeda is if you're in Pakistan or Waziristan or someplace, if you have Al-Qaeda passing by the door, they can come and bomb you and destroy your house too in the process. But somehow in Libya, it's a different brand of Al-Qaeda, I guess, and that they become freedom fighters. This is simply the bankruptcy of the foreign policy that we've had for the past 10 or 12 years. But now they've twisted it and turned it so many times that it's I think becoming obvious to a lot of people around the world. But the point is, this entire model has broken down in Syria, right? It's failing. Now, some point during the course of this year, London and Washington will be confronted with the fact, well, your Syrian destabilization has been a complete failure, and your attack on Iran, your encirclement of Iran, is also therefore failing. What do you do? If they decide to go to a confrontation, that's where the stuff with Russia comes in, and that's really what Obama is trying to get. He's saying, give me until November, December before you do your countermeasures. The idea then being that if, in July or August or September, right, the prime military season and the prime bombing season, if we get a confrontation between the U.S. and Russia over some massive issue in the Middle East, the U.S. blackmail potential will be greater if the Russian countermeasures have not been done. The Russians want to put these missiles in the Kaliningrad area and also on the Russian coast of the Black Sea, right, opposite the Balkans, opposite Turkey. So this is very, very serious and much too important to be left in. And
Russian troops are being injected into Syria on record now. I mean, this is disastrous. Briefly, what do you make of Corzine openly being caught stealing the money, which we already knew, not getting in trouble, Europe melting down, austerity, everything you talked about in the Obama deception coming true? What's the next phase of this?
Well, of course, what it shows is the corruption of the Democratic Party, right? We've got this wonderful country of ours where we've got reactionary Republicans on the one side, but then the alternative to that becomes Wall Street Democrats. And among the Wall Street Democrats, Corzine is one of the champions, right? He was a senator from New Jersey.
Governor.
He got bored with that. He decided to become governor of New Jersey. And then he was voted out because he was not a good governor. Again, how can you be when you've got, your main focus is how to help Wall Street? So I think there's he's now been caught with his hand in the till, right? This is I guess embezzlement, and a pretty big bezel involved at that. Whether he's above the law, well, I guess we're soon going to find out, right? What about Attorney General Eric Holder? Are you going to enforce the law against a finance oligarch, or did they all get off, right? Sometimes they do.
Meanwhile, Holder's shipping guns into Mexico to blame the Second Amendment. It's just a bunch of crooks.
Yes. And of course, at that point, well, at that point, the answer would have to be political.
But Webster, undoubtedly saying they'll arrest citizens, take over infrastructure. I mean, they really are trying to start basically cooling. Well, the public's out buying guns, but they're now taking out a deep freeze and warming up all these police state grids. I certainly hope the oligarchs don't think they're going to use some type of martial law here. Even with a false flag, it's not going to work.
No, and I guess that gets us to Obama's executive order. Now, the executive order, obviously, he wanted to do this surreptitiously, right? He wanted to do a stealth operation. These Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, Washington, D.C., the rush hour is on, and then they reveal these things. So he's mobilizing what has always been there, right, since 1950, the Defense Production Act.
Stay there.
The question is, why now?
Yeah, we're going to come back and answer that question, why now, with Webster Tarpley. By the way, plug one more time when we come back, the intriguing debate you're going to have with some little nasty globalist minions on the other side. Boy, I wish I could be there for that. Stay with us. Webster Tarpley's our guest. Listen, we're going to get into Obama and the executive order here with Tarpley, but he was talking to me during the break, and I was like, hey, I need to send a cameraman up to D.C. to the International Spy Museum next Monday when you're going to debate David Frum and Jonathan Kay and a bunch of other people. And he said, oh, sorry, they're not letting anybody else tape. It's just them. So it's a TV production. And it's going to be Tarpley with like 5 people against him, with David Frum, the neocon from the White House, moderating. I mean, that would be like having, having the Washington Redskins coach moderating as a referee in the Dallas Cowboys versus the Washington Redskins sudden death overtime in Super Bowl 87, in the future. I mean, it is total conflict of interest. So I'll say this, it's $15 to get in. Neocons only watch Fox News, so they don't even know this event's coming up. But it's 9/11 false flags and black ops, an evening of debate with David Frum, Jonathan Kay, and Webster Tarpley. So it's $15. Members of the inner circle, I guess that means if you're members to it, $12. I want patriots to get in there, and I want you guys, you know what to do. Get video of this. Don't, because what's going to happen is, I'm going to guess, they're doing a TV production for History Channel or Discovery or something, and they're going to cut it up, Webster, where you look like you've been lobotomized by a monkey with a jackhammer.
I assume now, if maybe you want to contact them directly and ask about having a camera, because that part I didn't really look into.
Hey, we'll just turn loose the info warriors. They'll get cameras in. They've got to hide it where they hide the watch in Pulp Fiction. They're going to get them in. Anyways, but you're going to go in there with these piranhas, huh?
Yeah, look, I think it's important because, what are the issues, right? I mean, there's this broad issue of... No, but say the Latin thing, because it's, any publicity is good publicity, and people attack me. I love it. And teach me that Latin. This is a Roman proverb, right? So it's in Latin, and it goes like this. Bona fama, good fame. Mala fama, bad fame. Semper fama, right? Semper is always fame, fama. So bona fama, mala fama, semper fama. Good fame, bad fame, it's all the same. It's all fame, and we'll take it. On Broadway, we say, a knock is a boost. If you attack me, it means that I'm somehow important enough to be worthy of attack, right? There's no such thing as bad publicity, and so forth, right?
No, all of my enemies with jealousy and operatives and all of them, they've only helped us. Just like the Bible says, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. So keep it coming. I love it.
And of course, you have to go into the blood and sand of the arena, right? Unfortunately, this is the arena in which the battle of ideas has to take place. So when you have the opportunity, you have to do it. But
it's important to point out it's rigged. They wouldn't have to have 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and they run the rules. The only way they're letting you in the arena is with both hands tied behind your back, and you'll still, absolutely clean the floor with them, Webster.
Yeah, well, you have to be ready for that. That's for sure.
I would just ask him, hey, how come 2 passports got found that day? It's not just that they survived, they were found. And then I'd go, oh, why were they trained at U.S. military bases? Newsweek, why was Mayor Willie Brown warned not to fly? San Francisco Chronicle, why was U.S. troops massing around Tajikistan and Uzbekistan in the month before 9/11 and Bush signed the launch order to attack the day before? Source Associated Press, Newsweek. Oh, you want some more?
My idea would be that not to go so much into these technical details, but rather the question of the invisible government, the rogue network, what that has meant for the United States, why that is a threat to everybody's future, why it's real, right? It's empirical.
Yeah, because it's going to be a bunch of spies there from all different governments in the meeting.
I hope so.
Of course there will be. Stay there, Webster. I want to get into the executive order. But we're live right now. Webster, finishing up here. I just imagine you in that arena with those piranhas. But again, I'm pleased that they have to have it all rigged. That's good. It shows their weakness. It still won't be enough, even though they're delusional, thank God. So we're beating them so badly right now, so let's let that continue. Webster, getting into the executive orders, as you said, they're thawing out things that were meant for during a nuclear war when Congress has all been killed. But Obama's saying for any reason, including threats, peacetime martial law is what all the constitutional scholars are calling it. They're scared, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think the big question, again, is the ominous thing is why now? Why do this now? The Defense Production Act has been there since 1950. It's a product of the Korean War. I think many of these provisions could be used in a very positive way. We could use them to get out of the current depression. But this is not what Obama has in mind. He's sort of pulling out the Defense Production Act, and he's updating it in the following way. The Defense Production Act up to now, the executive orders that have been issued under Clinton and a couple of others, make FEMA the lead agency in coordinating this emergency economic and maybe political rule, but certainly economic. In other words, the war mobilization, war preparedness of the entire U.S. economy was normally then going to be under FEMA, except FEMA has now been included in the Homeland Security Department. So this means that the head of FEMA is no longer going to be the czar, but it's going to be Napolitano, right? Secretary of Homeland Security. And, of course, her track record of incompetence, malfeasance, nonfeasance, insolence, impudence.
Well, I mean, isn't Mr. Napolitano just a puppet?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you've got to look at, at who, and then, exactly all the influences that would converge on her. That's one side. The other side is that the notion of national defense has been broadened in the following way. There was a law called the Stafford Law, which has to do with natural emergencies, earthquakes, hurricanes, forest fires, things like this. That has all been incorporated in. So those are the two big sort of formalistic changes. That FEMA is no longer the lead agency. They don't chair the Homeland Security panel or whatever it is. There's a whole interagency group that they've created. Generally, it's going to be the lead agency is Homeland Security, and the definition is broadened to include all of these so-called natural disasters. But now, what is he really looking towards? Well, one could be the obvious, right? Iran, right? Anything with oil, anything with the Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf, that could be what he has in mind. It was they want to be ready for a confrontation, and that seems to be where at least some forces are pushing. Another question would be the short-term collapse of the dollar or the euro and the dollar, some kind of catastrophic dollar panic, a rush to the exits to dump all the dollars in the world. That could make it very hard to get oil because obviously one of the things that's included in this executive order is stockpiling. You can create, stockpiles of all kinds of...
What do you make of the NDAA, though, and the communist Chinese using that as their own secret arrest model? I mean, this is getting really crazy. Yeah,
and again, these things are now adding up, right? Because you've got this NDAA with the, Guantanamo forever with torture.
They're saying they'll spy without warrants now. Why? We only got 30 seconds left. Why is there a coming out of the closet right now?
It can be war with Iran. It can be the depression. It can be that they're looking forward to riots. and this is generally Weimarization. This is what happened in Germany, 1931-32.
Yeah, get out of the depression, or the next move is dictatorship. Webster, we got to have you out in the next few weeks again. Things are moving so quickly. Tarpley.net, our site's Infowars.com. Thank you so much, Tarpley. Good luck at that debate. Everybody should buy tickets and be there and support you next Monday in the District of Criminals. Be there, folks. We'll be right back.